Hi, Scholastic Book Clubs. I'm Eliot Schrefer, the author of Endangered, and I'm here to answer a few questions. I fell in love with bonobos when I first started reading about them. Compared to chimpanzees, they are a much more peace-loving, matriarchal ape. And so infants do a lot better in their societies. There's none of the infanticide you see with chimpanzees. And they also are really inspiring to me as another model for where we might have come from. So for that reason, I really fell for them in an almost scientific way. But it was when I started reading about Congo, which is the only country bonobos live in, that I really started to see it as a conflict and the source of a novel. Because Congo is home to the worst world conflict since World War II. 5.4 million people have died there. And so the idea that this peace-loving, inspirational ape that could be an alternative model for where we came from lives only in the country with the greatest human conflict and the worst side of human nature seemed like something that was really worth exploring. It was a kind of a central irony that made me want to write Endangered. When I arrived in Congo, I had a book that was all situation and all character and no setting. So it was almost like a play. It was just all just people moving in empty space. And then once I was actually there, I had a sense of what the country felt like and actually what bonobos felt like. I had sort of this image of them as these kind of squishy, stuffed animal-like creatures, but they're actually really wiry and dense. They have almost no body fat, so it's like this little ball of dense material, which was really unexpected and kind of changed how Endangered operated, because Otto, the young orphan bonobo, he's actually kind of athletic and moves around a lot. Whereas when I first imagined the book, I imagined him more sort of like a Cabbage Patch doll that Sophie could carry around with her. So it actually changed quite a bit as I observed the bonobos and spent some time at the sanctuary outside of Kinshasa. I actually don't think I would have been able to survive what Sophie goes through in Endangered. Once she's out of the sanctuary and she's making her way across the country, I might have had a chance, an equal chance as Sophie of making it. But there's a point in the book, in the first third of the book, where Sophie actually has to live with bonobos in the jungle. And bonobos, every bonobo that has come to this orphanage in Congo is an orphan. Its parents were killed by men. And so the young bonobos actually have a lot of hostility, just innate reactions to human males that make them very hostile. Whereas human females actually can interact with them very freely and there's no sense of aggression from the bonobos. So I think actually any man would have found it very hard to survive in the jungle with bonobos. Because while they're very peace-loving, they protect themselves. And if they see you as a threat, they're 3 times stronger than a human, and so they could very easily hurt you or kill you. I had an impression of Congo that it was always going to be wildlife, like in those alphabet things they have above nursery cradles, that it's like all, lions roaring and like really hot sun and lots of tropical fruit. But the actual country is not that hot. It was probably, I was there in June and it was in the upper 70s the whole time. The skies were a little bit gray. It wasn't that bright. So it was very comfortable to be in. So it wasn't this sort of humid, hostile environment that I'd imagined Congo would be. It was actually very pleasant. So that was one thing that surprised me. The hardest chapter for me to write is when Sophie has to spend a prolonged period of time with a child soldier towards the end of the book. And for me, as I was writing it, it was the one that was most moving for me, mainly because in order to get across this child soldier's point of view, I really had to shift my allegiances in the book from Sophie and Otto, who I desperately wanted to see survive, to this child soldier who had his own really complex life history, that he had been, an innocent boy at one point and then abducted and then had spent years killing people in the meantime. So getting into that mindset was really hard, but I actually found that as I was writing that scene, they have some really quiet moments together where Sophie and this child soldier feel a lot of kinship. And I sort of understood him, which was really hard for me as a writer, but makes that chapter probably the one I'm most proud of in the book. Yes, absolutely. There was one bonobo named Oshwe, who was a recent arrival at the sanctuary, and he was only 18 months old, so he was very small. And because he was so small, he couldn't have breakfast with the other nursery orphans because they would get to all the food before he did, and he would sort of run up, and the plate would be empty, and he would go hungry. So he and I would eat on a little bench outside of the nursery every morning, and we'd have breakfast. And so he would have a couple of bananas and an orange, and then he'd finish off with peanuts. And he really loved peanuts because he could bite into the outside, take off the shell, and then he didn't like the red papery covering of the actual peanut. He just wanted the white kernel. And so he would peel them with his teeth like a corn on the cob, and then like extract the red papery piece, and then just eat the peanut. And he would make these little noises while he did it, like it was the hardest thing in the world, sort of like. But then he would finish off his peanuts and really enjoy the breakfast. So it was like a morning ritual for me. I would get up and go hang out with Oshwe the bonobo, and he really became Otto in the book in my head while I was sitting with him. My favorite book about a human's connection with an animal would be Julie of the Wolves, which is set in Alaska, and it's about an Inuit girl who escapes into the Arctic tundra to avoid a marriage that is prearranged for her, and winds up surviving by following a wolf troop. And it's really very accurately observed and really brings out wolves' behavior, and it's very informative and very, very beautiful. My main purpose in writing Endangered was to have a story that would make you want to keep reading at every page. That was my main goal. But at the same time, there were other things I wanted to get across as I was writing it that I hope the readers would come away with. I feel I always resisted learning about Congo or a lot of the conflicts in Africa because it's so immense and so troubling, and there seems like there's nothing you can do, that it's very hard to just sit down and read an article about it. So I wanted to find another way in. And I felt like bonobos, which are these massively charming apes, were a way to sort of learn about Congo, both for me and I hope for the reader as well.